what is going to be decided in political field, we do not know. We do not well informed. And perhaps I should point only two things. One of them, the transatlantic trade investment partnership between European Union and US being negotiated nowadays. What will be its content? What will be its goal in commercial interests that are being regulated or non-regulated in so sensitive matters? And perhaps I'd like to hear some comments from you about this. And another concern I have, perhaps you already read that in the next Davos conference, next 20th January, one of the themes will be the importance of health for economic development. And when we hear about economic development, normally the concern in this environment will be how to get money from health and not how to protect citizens, even if protection is not against to serve people. But I think our main debate will be how to put the need to respect the principles in these environments that normally are decided apart from your intervention, because things normally are not linked. And I think that it is very important to talk about this, because parliaments, of course, have to audit governments and political bodies, but we know that in national parliaments and in European parliaments, sometimes parliamentarians have not enough knowledge to read what is not written in this kind of agreements, but we have to influence them in order to make principles be respected. And I think this should be the core debate for this session: how to respect privacy and sharing in the sharing of data, how to respect the decision of each one of us in self and informed consent, and what is morally acceptable in intellectual property with this kind of information and knowledge. I'd like to hear some comments from you, and if you do not know to talk now, perhaps I could ask the audience if they want to put some questions upon these some themes we discussed in this session. And perhaps one of my colleagues would like to comment. Yes, please.
Well, yes, this is an extremely important part of the meeting, because they are really the basic principles. And first of all, I think that seeing that from my point of view of a member of the European Parliament, and specifically of the ENVI committee, which has also the responsibility of public health, but also a member of STOA, that is Science and Technology Option Assessment. So we have been involved into a service to our colleagues in terms of trying to understand and make understood the new challenges. And of course, here we have extremely important challenges. We are in an aging population in general in the world. And so we need, say, a drastic change in the public health organization. And that is very important because the genomic public health is representing a chance of having a more targeted action of drugs, for instance, and a better understanding of some environmental threats like allergies, because that could be very important. In addition, I think that from the very characteristics of our genome, that is, say, very different in the manifestation, but the working is exactly the same for every person. So I think that we should somehow temper the concept of, first of all, intellectual property and the privacy with the concept of common good applied to this field, because every advancement that is done, for instance, in the genome and in the genome application is a benefit, a potential benefit to every person. So this is something that should be considered as a main background for the application. And of course, the informed consent is also extremely important, and that again implies, I would say, a revolution in education, because these concepts should be given very early to all our youth and make effective the concept of informed consent, because that is at stake. So I just stop here, but I think that there are the premises for, I would say, a revolution, not only of our public health organization, but also on the understanding of, say, a common human brotherhood.
Thank you, but of course we can comment with the presiding principle of all the things, and it's already incorporated in the Declaration of Public Health Genomics. And of course you talked about health literacy as a new big revolution in the way we organize and we deal with health, of course. Anyway, Iñaki already asked to make some comments. Please do.
I think I'm mostly in agreement with Vittorio. I think public health genomics is a last chance for public health, not to becoming a healthcare system business, just business. If we go, for example, to the last report that was produced by the OECD about the expenditure on health and results on health. And if you go to the expenditure of health, the first position is the US. I think Cecile could bring some other issues in this sense, but its first position, US, in spending on health, taking into account the gross domestic product, is almost 20%. If we go to the mostly to the all the healthcare systems in Europe, we are talking about an investment of in terms of gross domestic product about 12, 14. And if we go to results on health, I think the United States is among the 18th among 34. So public health genomics, it will be the last chance also to citizens, and I think in some sense health literacy will be the challenge, in terms that they should be aware that they could make something, because up to now we have considered the healthcare systems as the fathers or the mothers that are going to take care of us, and they are going to give magic solutions, like putting your trust on a chieftain or a magician, in terms of they are going to give me a bill to solve my problems. Nowadays we have the chance to, and it will be in the future, to develop things that will give you a chance to put tailored intervention on what you should do in terms of lifestyle, in terms to, or improving your chance, or staying here with us, or improving your life. So the issue would be, it is the citizens they are prepared. We are doing enough efforts in terms of educating them, in terms that they should take care of their own health care. And if you have been talking about the possibility of public health genomics in terms of solving some questions on chronic diseases and aging, and I would say that we don't have the answer now. And in terms of chronic diseases, there are not much things done. Mostly the efforts have been located on mostly cancer and mostly some other monogenic and polygenic diseases, but not on chronic diseases that are the main expenditure of the healthcare systems. So perhaps research should be produced in terms of that, and that will be related to prevention.
Very well, thank you. Perhaps I think Cecilia would like to make some comments now. Cecile, please do. Não tem. Precisamos que ligue o microfone. We need to switch on the micro, okay?
Yeah, no, I'm here. But I could not hear Inarti's point very well, so because there's a lot of noise on the line.
But we hear you very, very well.
Don't worry, but I don't know where to respond to. I can say something because I have opinions enough, but I'm not sure whether it's popular.
We were trying to answer something around how to respect principles with all this environment wanting to make money upon health, with forgetting citizens and protection of their rights. That's what we were trying to deal with.
Yeah, I think I have to contact IT to get the other connection back because it's very difficult to hear.
So perhaps you could keep online, and I'm going to give the floor to Jens that already asked me to, because he wants to make some comments, and afterwards João Lavinha, and perhaps in the end, listening to their comments, you could say something also. Thank you, Cecilia.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you. To me, now we're discussing big data. I think the main issue is how to keep the trust of the people. The trust that we won't misuse their data. And I think there's a risk that if we open data too much, companies, scientists will go out some way which will create hype and lots of economic use in a false way. And therefore I'd like to go back to one of your policy options, because I know that it's us as politicians who are supposed in the end to make a decision on what to do. And you give us a choice. You tell us either restrict data to strict public use or to make some criteria and open up. And the easy way for us would be to say, okay, we keep the data in public use. And when I hear you talk before, you talk like we need to open up to make the innovation and use these data, okay. But I'd like to ask you, couldn't we keep them closed and still, would that be an okay solution? Because that would be the easy way for us to do it. And then you had to fight to get into the public system and do the research there.
Alistair, you want to say something?
Yes, and initially to respond to that last question, but also to pick up on some of the questions that you raised in your remarks, Madam Chairman. Just over a year ago, the Prime Minister of the UK announced that 100,000 NHS patients would have their whole genomes sequenced for healthcare and research purposes. Now, in order to protect the patient interest in that, the genome data that is revealed from those sequences will remain held within the National Health Service. It is intended that there will be commercial partnerships to look at opportunities for therapy development, but the commercial sector will not be allowed to export the data from the NHS. Basically, they can come in, they can look at it, they can do their analysis, and they can take their conclusions away, but they can't take the personal data away. And that is a possible way forward of allowing for a framework which encourages investigation, which permits innovation, but which recognises that there are sensitivities about your data being made too freely available in other contexts. But I think we need to be realistic. In one sense, there's no such thing as privacy. And if we try and pretend there is, we set up too many false expectations. Really, I think what we need to try and control is the uses of data, because that's where the threat to trust and confidence resides, in my opinion. Healthcare systems are under enormous pressure. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about the richest healthcare systems in the world or the poorest. There is always more that could be done than can be done. And the challenge is to use information appropriately in order to secure the best possible use of the resources that are available. And that requires the collection, the analysis, the synthesis of data into plans and strategies. Again, and I'm sorry I quote an English example, the Public Health England is planning to establish a national congenital abnormality and rare disease register for all patients identified with rare diseases. In the first instance, it will be a very simple set of data that's collected, your name, your NHS number, your date of birth, and your diagnosis. But with that, you can plan. You know how many people have got a particular condition. You can work out what their needs are. You can know where they live, how old they are, and when you need to put interventions in place to support them. It also creates the opportunity to generate critical mass for the investigation and for research. That data, I think, most people would agree, is appropriate and sensible for healthcare systems to collect, because they need to plan and use the use of the resources that are devoted for the delivery of healthcare effectively. They need to prepare for future developments which we can see coming down the track. But if that data was then used in appropriate ways, then we would all have the cause of concern and the public confidence would be lost. So I think it's about not can you preserve privacy, but can you prevent abuse, misuse. And of course you can never totally prevent misuse without at the same time preventing use. And that's clearly, if you have too draconian a regulatory framework, then you forego the opportunity to do good as well as preventing harm. So it's about balancing the benefits and risks on a case-by-case way of moving forward.
Thank you. João Lavinha, please.
Thank you. I would like to address the question that Maria Belém put forward regarding the relationship between health and economic development. Probably not from the perspective of healthcare as an industry, but from the perspective of health as well. And having this in mind, I would like to call your attention to the so-called property-related diseases, namely malaria, tuberculosis and AIDS, which are real hurdles that are put on the way of many populations of the world, preventing them to reach economic development. We all know that the environmental and behavioral determinants of health are overwhelmingly important for determining the health status of a population, and that the genetic and even biological determinants of health are responsible for a tiny proportion of the health determination. So this is kind of background information that we should not lose sight of, because I think it is within into this perspective that public health genomics should be considered. That there are other much more important determinants of health than the genomic and biological ones.
Okay, thank you. It's true, but things are like they are. Economic interests are on all the considerations. My major concern was to be aware of the risks and to attain the correct use of these tools and of this knowledge, how to put it serving people, even knowing that, of course, a lot of people dealing with them has other interests. But I think the important is to be aware of the risks and how to regulate them. And how to make that people understand well what is proposed to them when they are suggested to be included in some studies or to be I think we already regulated well how to deal with things inside health systems, at least in some countries. But I think there is another danger for other fields to have access to this data. Of course, I am talking about giving this kind of data to employers, for instance, to allow discrimination through the knowledge of some prognosis we can make with this kind of data, and things like that. And parliaments should be concerned with this kind of possibilities. So we cannot think only about our inside health systems. We can have a broader approach of this kind of programs. It was my major concern. Anyway, I don't know if Cecilia now wants to make some comments.
I can hear you much better now. Regarding your last comment about your worries that that employers are going to misuse genetic data for discrimination, I think one important aspect to keep in mind is that DNA is not so very predictive that an employer can usefully apply that as a test. At the end of the line, I think when employers want to use it, they can employ nobody anymore. Because we all may carry mutations for one or more very serious diseases. And for many common diseases like heart disease or dementia or whatever, the DNA on itself is not so very predictive. So I think we should carefully monitor what is going on, but not to be too anxious, because the DNA in itself, that was what the other speaker also said, other risk factors are much more important to determine disease risk than DNA.
Okay, thank you. And now I'm going to ask the audience if anyone wants to raise an issue. Yes, please.
Yes, Lars Kluwer from the Danish Board of Technology. Okay. Lars Kluwer from the Danish Board of Technology. One of the things that pointed out in the policy brief is that privacy in a way is an illusion when you have large chunks of data, because we can triangulate in a way data. So we can find people if we want, even from anonymized or pseudo-anonymized data. What is Plan B then? If we want to, if we say that privacy has or will have in the future some meaning, for example, with when we begin to break the border of understanding some of the DNA much better, then employers will be able to actually predict if people get something. That's the meaning of the whole thing, to be able to predict something. So at some point we will be able to do that. So how will we deal with that at that time? One thing that hasn't been mentioned at all is simply to not allow it, to have punishments for triangulating. So what about making it punishable to use data in a wrong way?
Iñaki wants to make some comments, please.
Yeah, totally right. The issue of privacy will be a nonsense well, it is a nonsense now. You have been said about the possible agreement between the US and the European Union in terms of commercial activities and how it relates to genomics. We are doing. The data is sharing now. Our consumers are sending the genomic data that in the case of direct-to-consumer tests, and we don't know where they are. And the issue is that it's not the data of the single patient, because in the past it was single patient data, but it's not the data of the patient. It's the data of the patient, his or her son, daughter, mother, father, grandparent, whatever, and it's all there. And there was a curious experiment in the US in terms of tracing genetic strands. And you can say we are going to make those data safe. It's impossible, because you are going to be traced through your genetic profile. So finally, that will be combined with some other data, and they will know who you are. So the issue is much more transparency, and as Alastair has said, it is avoiding unregulated misuse or abuse of those data. That is finally, and also to try to make much more health literacy on what are the possibilities of genomics in terms of developing diseases. And as Cecile and Joao has pointed out, we are learning from DNA that DNA is not so important. It is much more important where we live, how we live, and how is our lifestyle. It is amazing. The combination of all those things, they are important. But the citizens should know that where they live, how they live, and what is their lifestyle will be much more crucial than their genome.
Thank you very much, Alistair. I think you put the right question. or right answer to the question. Alistair, please.
Yes, I mean, I think we have to be sensible about this, really, because you know, if you actually look around you, most people in developed economies live to the age of, you know, well over 70, now into our 80s, and then we die of one of a range of common diseases, cancer, heart disease, dementia, whatever. But by the time we're in our 80s, we're of very little interest to most employers in the context of being an employee, although we might be you know, a subject for their marketing. And the other age at which the other age at which disease is manifests itself is in childhood, which is usually too soon for, you know, we've given up on child labour in Europe. Our middle years tend to be our healthiest years, and then, as has been said by Cecile and by Inaki, you know, it's how we live and where we live. You know, if I were an employer and I wanted to discriminate against people likely to be ill whilst they work for me in London, I would only employ people who lived in Westminster, because they live at least 10 years longer than people who live in Hackney. And I don't need a sophisticated genetic test to discriminate in that ridiculous way. You know, so the idea that we can, you know, get this incredibly refined DNA analysis in order to make crude and inappropriate judgments seems to me it's, you know, the answer is to educate and stop people wasting their money on things that won't actually help them.
Thank you. I think it's very important to inform people in general about the limits of these kind of things, to prevent them to be abused from commercial interests. Of course, I agree with you. Please, I have a lady wanting to make a comment in the audience.
Thank you. I'm Lawrence from Council of Europe. It strikes me that you talk about employers who talk about insurers. And insurers are interested in your life expectancy, for example. And they are also more and more interested in health issues because when those social security systems were in place, dependence was not an issue because you were dying before of other diseases. Now we are transformed, let's say, deadly disease into chronic disease. And you have more and more people who will be in need of assistance. Not necessarily, by the way, health care, but assistance, care in a broader sense. And the private sector has probably a major place here to provide support, financial support for that, because the private sector won't be able to provide. And insurance companies are very interested in your genetic information in this context. And I think this is probably much more important to address that, to think about this. And when I was listening about, reading about, for example, having your whole genome sequence and then keep it in your medical file for, you know, further use later on. But one of the criteria for insurance companies is that what is your medical file and you know should be also shared with the insurers. So I think this is an issue which needs to be also looked into.
Yes, you are absolutely right. When we discussed the protection data law here in the Parliament, of course, this was one of the major issues. I only spoke about employers because I only give a small example, but of course, and for these kind of problems, you know that there will not be responsible the insurer when we had some health data information. So I think you are absolutely right. We cannot think this is something we should not care about because privacy is a nonsense or because we cannot be able to prevent misuse. I think with the trends of transferring to private sector some coverage, about health problems and things like that. In many countries, that will be a huge problem, and we have to deal with them. And now that we are approaching to the end of this session, I don't know if someone else would like to make some comment. Yes, please. I am registering to interventions. Please, I would like to ask you to be very brief. Thank you.
Begin a colleague. I'm from the expert group. I think we agree on the fact that living conditions and where and how we live is more important probably than our genes, at least for most of us probably. And I think it would also be a policy decision to kind of reflect on what kind of investment we need to make predictions, health predictions, longevity predictions, for example, on the basis of genetics or on the basis of, for example, how we feed our children and how we what kind of exercise they get and so on, because obesity, for example, is a huge health problem or will be in the future. And then we also need to balance, public health investments in different fields. And I think this is an important policy question.
Thank you, please.
My name is André Krol from the Rato Institute. I noticed that there's a small tension in the debate up until now, because on the one hand we have the conclusion that genetic factors might not be that important, and on the other hand we have a strong plea, for instance, from Alistair Kent for raw data sharing. And so my question is, shouldn't this tension be addressed, because we are talking about sharing genetic data? But if the genetic factors are not that important in the overall picture, then this might have implications for data sharing policies. So I think this is an important point that should be addressed perhaps later today. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone wants to make a comment from the experts panel? Yes.
Yes. Just to come back on that last point, I mean, I think there are. It's important to look at the complexity of the situation. By sharing data, we will get an increased understanding of the mechanisms of disease and be able to develop interventions, be they new drugs or preventative strategies or whatever, that can be more closely targeted. So those will be important. They will be significant. They won't necessarily be significant just at an individual level. So it won't be that, we all know that smoking is bad, but it's really, really bad for you. It's about creating that kind of more targeted approach that will be possible. I think in terms of taking those broad indications and relating them back to you or to me or whatever, then it's a matter of nuance, of tempering it, so that we can look and say, yes, well, in my family, I know these diseases are more likely to happen. Therefore, I should, adjust my lifestyle to risk. But then, if and when they do manifest themselves, I really rather hope that there are some effective therapies that are focused on addressing the needs in me as well. So it's how you match up the competing factors, the possibilities, and focus them down into data that you can use for decision making, either on an individual level or on a population level. And I think too, with regard to the sort of societal applications, thinking about the insurance, for example, issue that was mentioned earlier, again, not all insurance is the same. It is in the interests of insurance companies to sell life insurance to people who are not going to die for a very long time. On the other hand, it's in their interest to sell social care insurance to people who are going to die very quickly because they won't be paying out for long. So, the idea that companies will maybe only sell social care insurance to people with a suicide gene, and they'll sell they'll sell life insurance to people with the immortality gene, is probably well into the realms of science fiction.
Okay, very well. I think we have still Cecilia want to make a comment? Please be brief because we are all in the scheduled time.
Yeah, no, I only want to underscore what Alistair is saying. I think, and also in response to Andre, I think what we should make have clear that DNA is not predictive enough to make predictions at the individual level, but we can make predictions on a group level, and therefore use DNA maybe to stratify treatments to groups of people and not at the individual level. So we should not be afraid that employers are going to use it. I think that's very unwise because DNA is not predicted at the individual level, but we may find that at a group level it can be very useful, and therefore I think we should continue in research and also think about data sharing that Alistair was promoting.
Okay, thank you. I think I have still someone interested in taking the floor. I would ask you to be brief because you will already attend the coffee break hour, but please. I'll just let them look. Na segunda fila.
Thank you. I'm Campbell Thompson. I'm from the INSERM, Institute of Health and the University of Toulouse, and I'm a member of the steering group in this project. I just wanted to underline that sharing the genome data alone won't bring much progress. And I think that in the data sharing policy that is being discussed, it's sharing what is useful to make progress in knowledge and then possibly in interventions. And this is not only the genome data, but all the other important data, where you live, what you eat, and there is a lot of discussions in the epidemiology world about sharing not only the genomic data that are coming up, but together with other data, and that is what it transformed it in meaningful information. I think this should be in the mind when discussing data sharing. We are talking about data sharing, personal level or group level, which are useful to make progress in knowledge, and that is certainly not only the genomic data.
Thank you very much. So I think we are going to conclude this session, and perhaps I could say that we share the principles, that it is important to be informed about how to control the use, how to prevent, in order to prevent misuse, inside and outside health field, and how to regulate data sharing, and not only genome data sharing, but all the data serving the common good. I think that it is important to have adequate and to produce adequate legislation, having all this as a concern, and to count with your expertise in order to allow us to produce adequate regulation. Principally regulated, but being aware of the things that sometimes we announce, but that are not under our control. And I think with more information and with more transparency, perhaps we will attain what is possible. Thank you very much for your collaboration. Thank you very much for the collaboration of the audience. And now, a coffee or a tea break, and we can go on talking about all these things in this break.